Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid. With the news of this hour, let's begin with the top stories first. At least 33 more Palestinians have been killed after Israel carried out its most intense offensive across the Gaza Strip yet. Health officials say dozens were wounded after Israeli airstrikes flattened two residential buildings and also hit home of Hamas's chief in Gaza. At least 181 Palestinians, including 52 children, have been killed and more than 1,000 wounded in Israeli strikes since 10th of May. Meanwhile, thousands of people have marched in support of Palestinians in major European and US cities. Meanwhile, Pakistan says Israel is violating international human rights laws by using unjustified force against defenseless Palestinians. Virtually addressing the emergency meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi reaffirmed Pakistan's unflinching solidarity with the oppressed Palestinians. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud also called on the international community to act urgently to put an end to military operations. Intense fighting between the Taliban and Afghan government forces have resumed in southern Helmand province as a three-day Eid ceasefire ends. The military accused the Taliban of attacking security checkpoints on the outskirts of Lashkar Gah and other districts of Helmand. However, a Taliban spokesperson refuted the military's allegation, saying the Afghan forces started the offensive. India has reported more than 4,000 COVID-19 deaths and over 311,000 infections in the past 24 hours. In Pakistan, 76 more people lost their lives to the virus and over 2,300 tested positive overnight. The global number of coronavirus infections has topped 162 million, with more than 3.36 million deaths. And in the mixed martial arts, Charles Oliveira beats three-time champion Michael Chandler to claim the undisputed lightweight title in Houston. He has now extended his winning streak to 9. And these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, at least 26 more Palestinians have been killed after Israel carried out its most intense offensive across the Gaza Strip yet. At least 174 Palestinians, including 47 children, have been killed and more than 1,000 wounded in Israeli strikes since 10th of May.
Disregarding global calls for de-escalation, Israeli rained down death and destruction on the Gaza Strip, flattening at least 2 residential buildings. Israeli jets also targeted the home of Hamas Gaza chief Yahya al-Sinwar. In a televised address, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pledged to continue the offensive on Gaza for as long as necessary. Israel's Defense Minister Benny Gantz dismissed the mandate and jurisdiction of the UN, saying no one has the right to question Israel's actions.
No country, institution or international body can question our right to protect our citizens and our sovereignty. I call upon Hamas, stop terrorizing our people and stop terrorizing yours. It is absurd that we do everything in our power to avoid hitting your civilians while you proudly hide behind them.
U.S. President Joe Biden held separate phone calls with Israeli and Palestinian leaders, expressing concerns over the escalating conflict. He told the Israeli Prime Minister that the safety and security of journalists and independent media is Tel Aviv's paramount responsibility. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also said He is deeply disturbed by Israel's strike on Gaza media building. This comes after an Israeli airstrike destroyed a building in Gaza that houses several international media outlets and residential apartments. Talking to supporters in Doha, Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh refused to give in and urged the Muslim world to extend whatever help they can.
But today, we are all responsible for Jerusalem. Whoever can help Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa with politics, with media, with social media or with financial support, please do. Whoever can do more than that, then please do.
The United Nations Security Council is set to convene meeting on the conflict today.
Now, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Israel is violating international human rights laws by using unjustified force against defenseless Palestinians. Addressing a virtual meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Qureshi reaffirmed Pakistan's unflinching support for the oppressed Palestinians. In his address, Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud condemned Israel's violations of Palestinian rights. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu held Israel responsible for the recent escalation of tensions in the occupied Palestinian territories, while Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif accused Israel of committing a genocide and crimes against humanity. Now, thousands of pro-Palestine protesters hit the streets in major cities around the world to express solidarity with the Palestinians.
The protesters slammed Israel for its brutal aggression and called on the international community to force an immediate halt to Tel Aviv's atrocities. Thousands of people took to the streets of Washington and New York, carrying signs and waving flags in a show of support for Gaza. A huge number of Palestinian supporters also staged protests across Europe, including Germany, Austria, France, and Greece. However, in Berlin, Paris, and Athens, police used tear gas and water cannons to disperse the peaceful protesters. Meanwhile, in West Bank, scuffles erupted between Israeli police and Palestinians, who were staging protests to mark the Nakba Day.
There is another wall where they will draw Palestine's map, and inside of it is Sheikh Jarrah's neighborhood, from where the fire started in all of Palestine. Today, on Nakba's 73rd anniversary, we do not want to say that Nakba is still ongoing, but we want to say today in Nakba's anniversary that it is time for the Nakba to stop after this popular outburst, after this revolution that Palestine is going through from sea to river. We want to say that it is time for the Nakba to stop, and hopefully in Nakba's anniversary next year, all of Palestine will be free.
Meanwhile, pro-Palestine and pro-Israel demonstrators faced off in Toronto.
Moving on now, intense fighting between the Taliban and Afghan government forces has resumed in southern Helmand province as a 3-day Eid ceasefire ends. The head of the Helmand Council accused the Taliban of attacking security checkpoints on the outskirts of Lashkar Gah and other districts. He said the fighting started early today and is still ongoing. However, a Taliban spokesperson refuted the military's allegations, saying the Afghan forces started the offensive. Helmand has seen intense fighting since the US began its troops withdrawal from Afghanistan earlier this month. Meanwhile, ISIS has claimed responsibility for the Friday attack on a Kabul mosque, which took 12 lives. Now moving to Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where police have arrested 2 sons of the martyred Hurriyat leader Muhammad Ashraf Sehrai. Police detained Mujahid Sehrai and Rashid Sehrai in Srinagar and took them to Kupwara. This comes a day after Indian forces arrested 21 people for holding protests against Israel's military offensive in Gaza. The occupying forces blame the Kashmiris for attempting to leverage the situation in Palestine to disturb public peace. Reportedly, a case has been registered against them for raising pro-freedom slogans. Meanwhile, Indian forces have launched a violent operation in the outskirts of Jammu city. Meanwhile, in India, a number of farmers have been injured after police bait and charged them for protesting at an event attended by Haryana's chief minister. Farmer leaders say the police fired plastic bullets, tear gas shells and arrested several protesters. Now, since November, farmers have been protesting against 3 new agricultural laws, which they say will destroy their livelihoods. The Narendra Modi-led government claims the new laws will modernize India's agriculture. Multiple rounds of talks between farmers and the centre failed to break the deadlock. Now, India has reported more than 4,000 COVID-19 deaths and over 311,000 infections in the past 24 hours. The global number of cases has topped 162 million, with more than 3.36 million deaths. More about the pandemic in this report.
With the troubling variant, drug shortages and disrupted vaccine drives, India continues to struggle with the dire coronavirus crisis. Member of India's upper house, Congress leader Rajiv Sattav has died of COVID-19 complications at the age of 46. Meanwhile, family members of patients staged a protest in Chennai city to obtain remdesivir drug that is used for the treatment of COVID-19. India's government official confirmed that bodies of coronavirus victims were found dumped in rivers. It reflected an alarming practice that officials believed may stem from poverty and fear of the disease in villages.
People are so scared that they're not even coming here to take bath. After reading and watching the news that over 40-50 bodies were found, out of which some were suspected to be coronavirus positive, despite their faith in the Ganges.
In the U.S., Center of Disease and Prevention Control said schools should continue to use masks and follow social distancing rule for this academic year, as all students will not be fully vaccinated. Down in the south, Argentina has crossed 70,000 deaths in the midst of a second outbreak that is worsened by a slow vaccination process. Medics say in the capital city of Buenos Aires, the mortality rate in intensive care is as high as 67%. Meanwhile, as Brazil registered more than 2,000 deaths and over 67,000 cases in a day, President Jair Bolsonaro yet again said Brazilians do not have to stay at home.
To the health professionals, we regret the deaths from COVID and the other deaths in Brazil, but we must face the problem. It is not by staying under the bed covers and at home that we are going to solve this problem. We have to face COVID-19. Life goes on. We are already talking about the third wave. If the third wave comes, we will also have the fourth, fifth, sixth infinite waves. Of course, we hope against it, but we must face it.
Europe seems to be seeing slightly positive developments. Tourist-filled airports, seaports and highways in Greece as the country officially opened its door to international visitors. Beaches in Italy also appear to be a bit crowded as the new rules come into force, scrapping quarantine requirements for visitors from the EU, the UK, among others.
Now, in Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed 76 more lives over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the nationwide fatalities toll has crossed 19,500. The ministry said nearly 2,400 tested positive for the virus overnight. It said the caseload has exceeded 877,000, while nearly 789,000 patients have recovered. The number of active cases stands at 68,819. The ministry said over 4,300 patients are in critical condition. Moving on now, the US and Britain have called on Myanmar's military to avoid civilian casualties in the northwestern town of Mindad. Both countries' missions in Myanmar issued statements after a shadow national unity government appealed for international help. The US Embassy said the military's use of weapons of war against civilians shows the regime's desire to hold on to power. Britain's mission said evidence of atrocities should be sent to UN investigators so perpetrators can be held accountable. Meanwhile, fighters of a local militia have pulled back from Mindad after days of assault by combat troops. Protests continue across the country, demanding restoration of democracy and freedom for jailed politicians. At least 790 people have been killed by the security forces in crackdowns on protests against the junta rule. North Korea has criticized South Korea's ongoing biennial military training and its recent joint exercises with the US. Pyongyang's media warned that Seoul will only stab itself in the eyes of confronting North Korea. It said Seoul's military building and drills are strictly based on its plan for a preemptive strike. Pyongyang said the moves further aggravate the already critical tension on the Korean peninsula. Earlier this month, South Korea and the U.S. also held a joint cargo loading and unloading drill at Daegu Air Base. Now, Turkey says it has killed 2 more PKK militants during an anti-terror operation in northern Iraq. In a tweet, the Turkish Defense Ministry said Turkish armed drones detected the militants in the Zap region. The ministry said the area was within the scope of Ankara''s Claw Yildirim operation. It said Turkey will continue operations until all terrorists are eliminated. Ankara holds PKK responsible for some 40,000 deaths in a 30-year conflict. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in Indonesia, 7 people have drowned after an overloaded boat capsized in a reservoir on Java Island. Police said the accident took place when all 20 passengers suddenly moved to the one side of the vessel to take a group photo. They added that 11 people were rescued and the search for 2 missing people was ongoing. Authorities said they will look into whether there was negligence by those managing the boat rides at the reservoir. Now, Chileans are heading to the polls on the second day of voting to decide who will write the new constitution. Citizens will select the 155 members of the Constitutional Assembly that will draft a new charter over a year. Elections will also be held for governors, mayors and city council members. Last year, citizens overwhelmingly decided to scrap the current constitution implemented during the Augusto Pinochet dictatorship. It was a key demand of demonstrators who were protesting since October 2019. Government data shows some 14 million people are eligible to vote in the country. According to Chile's electoral service, more than 3 million people cast their ballot on Saturday. Now, India is preparing to evacuate over 100,000 people from low-lying areas as cyclone TAUKTAE approaches the western coast. The powerful cyclone is expected to make landfall on Tuesday morning in the state of Gujarat. India's Met Department says the storm is very likely to intensify further during the next 24 hours. Heavy rains accompanying the storm have already claimed 2 lives in the southeastern coastal state of Kerala. Cyclone TAUKTAE is expected to cross Gujarat with winds gusts of up to 175 kilometers per hour. The Met Agency has warned of the possible destruction of houses, flooding of escape routes and rail traffic disruption. Now, SpaceX has successfully launched a Falcon 9 rocket carrying 52 Starlink microsatellites. The spacecraft is also transporting 2 satellites of other companies. The rocket was launched from the Florida State Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX says they intend to return it back to Earth once more. The Starlink network seeks to provide internet access through a large number of small satellites with a mass of less than 500 kilograms. The first 60 Starlink satellites were taken into orbit in 2019. Now, in mixed martial arts, Charles Oliveira has defeated Michael Chandler via a technical knockout in round 2 to become the new UFC lightweight champion. The title was vacated after the retirement of mixed martial arts legend Khabib. In the co-main event, Benil Dariush earned the biggest win of his career as he outpointed Tony Ferguson in a 3-round bout. In men's flyweight action, Rogério Bontorin emerged victorious after going the distance against Matt Schnell. Katanil Shukagan defeated Viviane Araujo by unanimous decision in the women's flyweight category. Meanwhile, Edson Barboza knocked out Shane Burgos with a ferocious right hand in the 3rd round. Now in tennis world number 1, Novak Djokovic has reached the final of the Italian Open after beating favourite Lorenzo Sonego 6-3, 6-7 and 6-2. Djokovic will take on Spaniard Rafael Nadal in the final today. And in horse racing, Robert has won the 146 Preakness Stakes, narrowly beating Midnight Bourbon and Medina Spirit. Favourites Medina Spirit and Midnight Bourbon led through much of the 9.5 furlongs dirt track. But Robert came storming down the last leg of the track, taking the lead at the very end to pick up the victory. This is his trainer Michael McCarthy's first ever win in a Triple Crown race. Meanwhile, jockey Flavin Pratt won the Kentucky Derby in 2019. The Bay Colts win ended the Kentucky Derby winner Medina Spirit's Triple Crown bid. In football, Leicester City have beaten Chelsea 1-0 to lift the FA Cup for the very first time in their history. Yuri Tielemans scored the only goal of the match to hand the win to the Foxes.
The Belgians settled the closely fought contest with a spectacular shot from 25 yards in the 63rd minute. Chelsea scored an equaliser, but VAR ruled out Wes Morgan's own goal due to offside in the build-up. The Foxes held firm in stoppage time to earn Brendan Rodgers his first major trophy in English football. Meanwhile, Bundesliga champions Bayern Munich were held to a 2-all draw by 10th-placed SC Freiburg. Robert Lewandowski equaled Gerd Müller's 49-year-old Bundesliga record for the most goals scored in a single campaign. The star striker has now scored 40 goals in 28 league games this season. Elsewhere, Juventus edged Serie A leaders Inter Milan 3-2 to keep their hopes alive for next season's Champions League. Juan Cuadrado's late penalty lifted Juventus to 4th place in league standings with 75 points.
Meanwhile, Los Angeles Lakers legend Kobe Bryant has formally been inducted posthumously to the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. More in this report.
Kobe Bryant has left behind an irreplaceable legacy after his untimely demise. The 5-time NBA champion died last year, aged 41, in a helicopter crash alongside his daughter and 7 others. Bryant spent his entire 20-year basketball career with the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA as a shooting guard. He enjoyed one of the most decorated careers in the history of the sport, claiming NBA Finals MVP honors twice. His widow Vanessa offered an acceptance on his behalf as presenter. Michael Jordan stood nearby.
All of your hard work and sacrifices paid off. You once told me, if you're going to bet on someone, bet on yourself. I'm glad you bet on yourself, you overachiever. You did it. You're in the Hall of Fame now. You're a true champ. You're not just an MVP. You're an all-time great. I'm so proud of you.
Other honorees of the class of 2020 included 15-time NBA All-Star Kevin Garnett and 3-time NBA Finals MVP Tim Duncan. 10-time Women's National Basketball Association All-Star and 4-time Olympic gold medalist Tamika Catchings was also inducted.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees, it's my honor to officially declare that you are hereby enshrined as the newest members of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame.
The ceremony at the Mohegan Sun Resort and Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut was postponed in August due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Now, National Basketball Association, the Milwaukee Bucks beat Miami Heat 122-108 to clinch their 11th win in their past 14 games. The Bucks are in third place in the Eastern Conference, while Miami slipped to sixth place after defeat.
Chris Middleton finished with 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists for the Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo also contributed 15 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists for Milwaukee. Meanwhile, Brooklyn Nets secured their 4th consecutive win by beating Chicago Bulls 105-91 at home. Kyrie Irving scored 22 points for Brooklyn, keeping them a game ahead of the Bucks in the East. In other fixtures, Los Angeles Lakers downed Indiana Pacers 122-115, while New York Knicks breezed past Charlotte Hornets 118-109.
And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.